Well, ultimately, Trump is going to have to recognize that he is not going to get at the negotiating table what he could not get on the battlefield. He lost the war. The Iranian people were able to stand up a joint war where the Trump regime, the Netanyahu regime, and a coalition or proxies in the region along with them were assisting them, and they failed. So why should Iran submit to the United States?
Today's debate on Piers Morgan Uncensored quickly turned into a major clash of worldviews. On one side, Piers Morgan pushed the familiar Western narrative around Iran. On the other, Professor Marandi challenged not just the accusations against Iran, but the credibility of Western media itself. And that's what made this conversation so intense. This wasn't just about facts, it was about trust. After events like the Iraq War, a lot of people became deeply skeptical of the narratives pushed by Western governments and media outlets. At the same time, critics continue pointing to years of human rights concerns surrounding Iran. So when both sides collided live on air, the debate instantly became explosive. Before we dive into the full story, comment where you're watching from, and don't forget to like and subscribe so you don't miss the next one.
So where are we here? The President of the United States on Friday was pretty much bringing things to a conclusion. He felt that Iran had agreed to most of the terms laid down, particularly giving up enriched uranium and so on, and reopening the Strait of Hormuz. But as we sit here now for this conversation, it appears that they're not even going to turn up at the peace talks. What is your understanding on that, first of all?
Well, everything that he said was fake. The Iranians agreed to nothing. And he just puts out information on Truth Social. And later on, he's possibly going to say that the Iranians promised everything, and now they're not doing it, and so we'll have to bomb Iran. And then people like yourself and others in the Western media will continue to demonize Iran and to attack anyone who defends Iran, and we'll have another war.
How long can Iran sustain more warfare, and in particular economic warfare involving the Strait of Hormuz? I mean, if Iran can't get its energy out whilst also depriving other people of theirs, how long can it economically sustain that kind of thing?
Well, we do have to remember, because Western media doesn't put it this way, but the United States and the Israeli regime started this war. It was completely unprovoked. And 300, 400 Iranians were murdered in this round. And this is not even the first war. This is the second war that they waged on us in less than a year. So if the Strait of Hormuz is closed, it's because, first of all, it was never fully closed. The Iranians closed it to a lot of the shipping by countries that were hosting U.S. bases. And I think if you were in Iran's place, you did the same. Those countries in the Persian Gulf that assisted the United States in waging war against the people, in Kuwait, the Emirates, Qatar, Saudi Arabia, and Bahrain, without them, the United States and Trump could not wage the war. So their shipping obviously is not going to have priority. But the strait wasn't fully closed. The Iraqis were able to use it. The Iranians used it. The Chinese used it. Others who weren't waging war against Iran were using it. But we had a ceasefire after Trump at the beginning of the war said that Iran must surrender, unconditional surrender. And of course, that didn't happen. And then ultimately, after almost 40 days, the United States accepted the Iranian 10-point plan as the framework for discussion. And of course, Trump didn't do it in practice because he's dishonest, and so is the Trump regime.
Now look, whether you agree with Marandi or not, he touched on something that makes a lot of people uncomfortable. The fact that Western media narratives are not always trusted anymore. And honestly, History is part of the reason why. After the Iraq War and the intelligence claims that later fell apart, many countries became deeply skeptical whenever the West starts framing another foreign conflict a certain way. That doesn't suddenly make Iran innocent in every situation. Iran still faces serious criticism over internal issues and human rights concerns, but Marandi's point was that global audiences no longer automatically accept every narrative at face value, especially when politics is involved. Then there's the sanctions issue, which often gets overlooked. Iran has been dealing with economic pressure for years already. Sanctions have damaged everything from its currency to trade access, meaning the country has been operating under restrictions long before this latest escalation. So, when people ask how long Iran can survive pressure, the reality is they've been surviving pressure for a very long time. And even the Strait of Hormuz situation is more complicated than headlines make it seem. It's rarely as simple as completely open or completely closed. Most of the time, it becomes a tool for strategic pressure rather than total shutdown, which is why negotiations like this almost never happen as cleanly as politicians publicly pretend they do.
After that, we had a ceasefire. In that ceasefire, Iran was supposed to open up the Strait of Hormuz to more ships, including those countries that host bases. But the Israeli regime was supposed to adhere to the ceasefire, and they didn't. And so for 10 days, Iran did not open the Strait of Hormuz to extra ships because Netanyahu was busy slaughtering people. And then when finally he was forced to accept the ceasefire, Iran said they're going to open up the strait for extra shipping. And then Trump said, but he's going to keep the siege on Iranian ports. Well, that's a violation of the deal too. So if he's going to impose a siege, the Iranians are not going to open up the strait. So from day one, when the United States carried out this aggression, to the ceasefire, and after the ceasefire, this crisis belongs to Trump and Netanyahu.
So what happens next?
Well, ultimately, Trump is going to have to recognize that he is not going to get at the negotiating table what he could not get on the battlefield. He lost the war. The Iranian people were able to stand up a joint war where the Trump regime, the Netanyahu regime, and a coalition or proxies in the region along with them were assisting them, and they failed. So why should Iran submit to the United States? If the United States wants a peace agreement with Iran, then it has to be a balanced agreement. But if Trump thinks that he can impose his will like an emperor and an imperial power, well, the revolution 47 years ago put an end to that. That's what the revolution was about. And that's what the Iranians are going to continue to do. They're going to preserve their dignity and sovereignty. That's something that the United States, especially under Trump, is not used to seeing. But Iran is different from other countries.
Now, even if you disagree with Marandi's framing, he does raise one point that's hard to ignore. Negotiations rarely work when one side feels like terms are being forced on them. That's been the problem in a lot of US-Iran tensions for years. Even past agreements only moved forward when both sides believed they were getting something in return. And this is where things get messy. In conflicts involving multiple countries and regional players, ceasefires almost always become fragile. We've seen it happen repeatedly across the Middle East, where agreements exist publicly, but violations and counter-violations continue behind the scenes almost immediately. That constant cycle destroys trust very fast. Then there's the sanctions issue. Iran has already spent years operating under economic pressure, so the idea that more pressure alone will suddenly force a major concession is not as simple as politicians make it sound. The country has adapted to surviving under restrictions for a long time now. Even the Strait of Hormuz works more as strategic leverage than an all-or-nothing weapon. Completely shutting it down would hurt Iran too, which is why tensions there usually revolve around pressure and signaling rather than total closure. And ultimately, that's the bigger issue here. If one side believes it didn't lose, it's not going to walk into negotiations ready to surrender. That's why these talks keep stalling, no matter how confident leaders sound in public.
We had a bizarre situation last week where the Iranian president issued a statement supporting the Catholic Pope Leo over attacks made against him by President Trump. And he said he condemned the insult to Your Excellency over the desecration of Jesus, the prophet of peace and brotherhood, is not acceptable to any free person. I wish you glory by Allah. Many people were taken aback by this because in the World Report of 2026, Iran Human Rights Watch specified that Christians, along with other religious minorities, face systemic discrimination in law and practice in Iran, and noted a significant wave of arrests targeting Christian communities following regional conflicts in mid-2025, often based on unfounded accusations of connection with Israel. So people are struggling to see why your president would be quite so vocal in his support of Catholics, given that backdrop.
Well, I think it was clear that you would find some way to support aggression and to demonize Iran, because that's what you do. And of course, that's fake. We have many churches in Iran. You refuse to travel to Iran. I propose to you to come to the country. You could go visit the churches, and you could go.
Well, you've refused to travel to London. Come to London, no problem. I'll see you in London.
I've lived. Well, right now they're busy bombing us. They're busy destroying our country and murdering our people. And I prefer to stay in Tehran under airstrikes to stand up for my people. And I've been to your country before, but you've never been here. I've been proposed that you read a book, Going to Tehran by Flint and Hillary Leverett, to learn a thing or two about Iran. But I'm pretty sure you didn't bother to buy it. But in any case, the Christian community in Iran is doing very well. They have MPs in parliament. And unlike Christians in Lebanon, whose churches are being destroyed by the Israeli regime, and unlike the synagogue in Tehran, which was bombed by the Israeli regime, all Iranian churches and all Iranian synagogues are well protected by the people of Iran. You don't want to say that, you don't want to believe that, because it goes against that narrative that you built in your mind, and that actually it's the Iranians that are the good guys. They're the ones who are the anti-genocide people, and your governments are the pro-genocide people. It's been like that for the whole.
Well, yeah, the reality is you always like to make this ad hominem as fast as you possibly can, and you prop up and defend a regime that has for 47 years oppressed its people and been a provider of funds and arms to a number of terror groups, including Hamas, Hezbollah and the Houthis. So whilst I'll take moral lectures from some people, you wouldn't be top of my list for the morality lecture, Professor.
When religion gets discussed in debates about Iran, the conversation usually turns extremely black and white very fast. But the reality is far more complicated than people online often admit. Iran officially recognizes religious minorities like Christians, Jews, and Zoroastrians, and even gives them representation in parliament. There are Christian communities in Iran that have existed for centuries, with churches, schools, and deep cultural roots that many people in the West rarely hear about. At the same time, that doesn't erase the criticisms either. Human rights groups have repeatedly raised concerns about restrictions, especially involving converts or people accused of political connections. So both realities can exist at once. And honestly, that nuance usually disappears the moment these topics become political talking points on international television. Because once tensions rise between Iran, Israel, and the West, everything becomes part of a bigger narrative battle. Every statement, every accusation, and every public gesture suddenly carries political weight far beyond religion itself. That's why debates like this become so emotionally charged. And while Marandi clearly pushes hard in one direction, his larger point about media narratives and selective outrage is still something many people around the world are paying closer attention to now. But let me know what you think in the comments below. Do you think Western media gives a balanced picture of conflicts like this? Or do political interests shape the narrative more than people realize? And if you enjoyed this breakdown, don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications for more videos like this one.